The high sanctum of the Ethel Guardian Collective did not smell of fear. It smelled of ozone, polished obsidian, and the faint, sweet scent of nutrient mist that sustained the elders during their cycles of deliberation. It was a place of absolute stillness, a chamber buried deep within the crust of a wandering moon, shielded from the chaotic radiation of the galaxy by layers of hyperdense shielding and ancestral arrogance. Here, the silence was not merely an absence of sound, but a heavy velvet weight that pressed against the mind, demanding reverence. Yet today, the silence was fractured. It was a hairline crack in a perfect diamond, invisible to the naked eye but catastrophic to the structural integrity of the Empire's psyche. High Counselor Xyltham, a being of slender limbs and iridescent scales that shimmered with the biological bioluminescence of his caste, stood before the great oculus, his primary eyes narrowed, his secondary sensory pits flaring with agitation. He watched the holographic projection that dominated the center of the room, a swirling, chaotic representation of the void sector known as the Abyssal Rim. Beside him, War Marshal Krev, a creature of hulking chitin and cybernetic reinforcements, paced with a heavy, rhythmic thudding that echoed offensively in the hallowed hall. The atmosphere was thick, curdled with an emotion the Ethel Guardians had not felt in 10,000 cycles, uncertainty. They were the masters of the known sectors, the architects of the interstellar peace, the benevolent shepherds of lesser species. They did not experience surprise. They calculated variables. But the variable burning on the edge of their sensors defied calculation. "It defies the laws of thermal dynamics," Krev growled, his voice a grinding of tectonic plates deep within his chest cavity. He gestured with a clawed manipulator toward the red anomaly pulsing on the display. "Nothing sustains that level of energy output without critical mass detonation. It is a star. It must be a rogue stellar fragment, ejected from the cluster and moving at superluminal velocities." Xyltham remained still, his long, delicate fingers tracing the rim of the dais. "A star does not correct its trajectory, Marshal," he said, his voice soft, melodic, yet edged with a chill that lowered the temperature of the room. "A star does not broadcast identification codes from an era before the Great Unification. A star does not scream in binary." The third figure in the room, Scholar Priestess Alara, drifted forward. She was suspended in an anti-gravity harness, her frail form draped in the silks of the archivists. Her eyes were milky white, blind to the visible spectrum but attuned to the data streams flowing through the sanctum's neural network. "The codes are archaic," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I have cross-referenced them with the databanks recovered from the ruins of the Orion Arm. They belong to the Terran Mandate." The name hung in the air like a noxious gas. Krev stopped his pacing. Xyltham stiffened. The Terran Mandate, the humans, a footnote in the history of the galaxy, a species that had flared up briefly, violently, consuming their own resources and expanding with reckless abandon before vanishing into the dark zones centuries ago. The collective had dismissed them as a tragedy of biology, aggressive, short-lived, and ultimately self-destructive. They were the parable told to young Ethel Guardians to warn them of the dangers of unbridled emotion and lack of unity. They were supposed to be dead. They were supposed to be dust, drifting in the silence of dead worlds. "Impossible," Krev barked, though the conviction in his voice was brittle. "The Terrans extinguished themselves. Their fleets were lost in the anomaly wars. We found the wreckage. We scanned the graveyards. There were no survivors." "And yet," Alara murmured, extending a trembling hand toward the hologram, "something returns, and it is not a fleet, it is a single vessel." The display zoomed in, the resolution sharpening as the deep-range sensor arrays focused their immense power on the object tearing through the fabric of real space at the edge of the system. It was difficult to comprehend the scale of it. The object was not merely a ship. It was a moving mountain of scorched metal and bleeding plasma. It was colossal, eclipsing the size of the collective's dreadnoughts by a magnitude that made Krev's mandibles twitch with involuntary localized spasms. The hull was not the sleek, reflective alloy of Ethel Guardian design, nor the organic curves of the symbiote guilds. It was a brutalist nightmare of jagged edges, welded patchwork, and scarring so deep it looked as though the vessel had been chewed upon by the maw of a black hole. But what drew the eye, what froze the blood in Xyltham's veins, was the fire. The ship was not just damaged, it was burning. It was wreathed in a corona of venting gases, ionizing radiation, and uncontrolled plasma. Acts that trailed behind it like a comet's tail of destruction. It looked like a piece of hell torn loose and hurled into the heavens. "The thermal signature is rising," the automated system intoned, its voice devoid of the terror that gripped the living beings in the room. Hull integrity at critical failure levels. Radiation leakage exceeding maximum safety parameters by 4,000%. Object is designated. Storm of smoldering doom. That is not a designation, Xaltham whispered. That is a description. What is the transponder signal? Alara closed her blind eyes, interfacing directly with the stream. The signal is weak, corrupted. It repeats a single loop. UNS Prometheus. Status broken. Mission hold. Cargo the end. Cargo the end? Krev repeated, his combat instincts finally overriding his confusion. They are a bomb, a suicide vessel sent by a remnant faction to strike at the heart of the collective. They are burning because their containment is failing. High Counselor, I request authorization to mobilize the home fleet. We must intercept and vaporize that vessel before it breaches the inner perimeter. If that reactor goes critical within the system biosphere, the radiation alone will sterilize 3 habitable worlds. Xaltham looked at the burning ember on the screen. It was moving with terrifying speed, ignoring gravity wells, ignoring navigation buoys, tearing a straight line toward the central star of their home system. It moved with the desperation of a dying animal seeking a place to collapse, or perhaps, as Krev suggested, with the malice of a vengeful ghost. But Xaltham was a politician, a creature of nuance, and he saw something in the trajectory that the soldier missed. The ship was not aiming for the planets. It was not aiming for the orbital habitats. It was aiming for the high orbital anchor, the location of the collective's primary energy siphon, the device that pulled power from the sun to feed their civilization. Wait, Xaltham commanded, raising a hand. There is no time to wait, Krev roared, the plates on his back grinding. It will be within weapons range in 10 microcycles. Look at it. It is a catastrophe waiting to happen. It is leaking antimatter residue. It is a flying tomb. It is hailing us, Alara said, her voice cutting through the argument like a razor wire. Silence descended once more. The room dimmed as the main communication relay engaged. The static was deafening, a roar of cosmic background radiation, the scream of stressed metal, the howling of energies that should not exist in a stable vacuum. And then through the chaos, a voice emerged. It was not the smooth, synthesized voice of a translator. It was raw, organic, heavy with fatigue, and layered with a mechanical distortion that suggested the speaker was breathing through a respirator that was failing. "This is Admiral Vance of the Prometheus," the voice rasped. Every word sounded like it cost the speaker a fraction of their life. "Do not engage, do not scan, we are leaking, we are hot. Requesting vector to solar disposal or immediate coolant injection. We cannot hold it much longer." Krev stared at the speaker grill. "Solar disposal, they want to fly into the sun." "They are asking for help," Xaltham realized, the pieces clicking into place. "They are not attacking, they are dying, and they are trying to ensure their death does not take us with them." "Or it is a ruse," Krev countered, though his aggression had lowered, replaced by a wary suspicion. "A Trojan horse. They get close to the sun, destabilize the siphon, and trigger a supernova. The humans were known for their madness. They weaponized atoms. They weaponized disease. Who is to say they have not weaponized a starship to kill a star?" "Open a channel," Xaltham ordered, his decision made. He stepped into the center of the dais, his bioluminescence flaring to a commanding gold. "This is High Counselor Xaltham of the Ethel Guardian Collective. Unidentified vessel Prometheus, you are entering restricted space. Your energy signature poses an existential threat to this system. Power down your engines and prepare for containment boarding, or we will be forced to fire." The response took a long time. The delay was not due to distance, but presumably due to the difficulty the crew had in operating their ruin of a ship. When the voice returned, it was accompanied by the sound of alarms, harsh, rhythmic klaxons that sounded like the heartbeat of a dying god. "Counselor," Vance's voice wheezed, "if we power down, the magnetic bottles fail. If the bottles fail, the vacuum collapses. You don't understand. We are not the threat. We are the cage. We are bringing the storm away from the front." "The front?" Alara asked, tilting her head. "There is no front. The galaxy is at peace." "Not your galaxy," the human voice replied, and for a moment the exhaustion lifted, replaced by a grim, iron-hard resolve that sent a shiver. Through the alien assembly. "We are coming in. We need heavy water. We need lead. We need silence. Do not shoot. If you break the hull, you let it out." The transmission cut. The holographic display turned red. The Prometheus had crossed the outer marker. "They are decelerating," Krev announced, reading the tactical data streams that scrolled rapidly across his vision. By the void, the deceleration forces, the G-forces inside that hull must be lethal. They are burning retro thrusters that are literally melting the armor plating as they fire. They are tearing the ship apart to stop. They are stopping at the Lagrange point, Xyltham observed. Away from the planets, away from the trade lanes, they are isolating themselves. We must go to them, Xyltham decided. Prepare the shuttle, a diplomatic envoy, and Krev bring a containment team, but do not arm the warheads. If they speak the truth, firing on them could be the last mistake we ever make. The journey to the Prometheus was a descent into madness. As the sleek silver diplomatic shuttle of the collective approached the human vessel, the scale of the devastation became apparent. The Prometheus was less a ship and more a floating city of wreckage. It was immense, kilometers long, a brutal wedge of dark iron and carbon scoring. Entire sections of the hull were missing, revealing the skeletal superstructure beneath, where arcs of blue electricity jumped between severed conduits like lightning in a thunderhead. The heat radiating from it was palpable even through the shuttle's shielding. The sensors screamed warnings about ionizing radiation, gravimetric distortions, and exotic particle decay. The human ship was venting atmosphere, a grim mist of frozen crystals trailing into the dark. But the most terrifying aspect was the light. From deep within the cracks in the armor, a sickly violet light pulsed. It was a color that hurt the eyes, a frequency that seemed to vibrate in the teeth of the Ethel Guardians. It was not the clean blue of fusion, nor the angry red of fission. It was something else, something older. Docking port identified, the pilot announced, his voice tight. It is manual, no automated guidance. I have to align visually. Do it, Krev ordered, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma lance. He was suited in full combat armor, a towering figure of intimidation, yet he felt small against the backdrop of the human Leviathan. The docking clang reverberated through the shuttle's hull. The airlock hissed, cycling the atmosphere. When the inner door slid open, the Ethel Guardian delegation was not met with a sterile corridor or a welcoming committee. They were met with a wall of heat and the smell of burning ozone, sweat, and copper. The corridor beyond was dimly lit by emergency strobes. Cables hung from the ceiling like jungle vines. The floor was grated metal, stained and scarred, and standing there waiting for them was a squad of soldiers. They were humans, but they were not the soft, fleshy creatures the archives described. These beings were encased in powered armor that looked as battered as their ship. The metal was pitted, scratched, and painted with symbols that held no meaning to the collective, skulls, lightning bolts, and crude tally marks scratched into the ceramic. They held heavy kinetic rifles, weapons that used chemical explosions to propel slugs of metal, barbaric, primitive, and utterly brutal. In the center stood a figure without a helmet. It was an old human. His skin was pale, almost translucent, etched with a roadmap of veins and scars. Half of his face was covered by a metallic implant that glowed with a faint red eye. He leaned heavily on a cane that looked like it was fashioned from a drive shaft. He wore a coat that might have once been a uniform, now stained with grease and oil. "I am Admiral Vance," the human said. His voice was the same one from the transmission, gravel and dust. He didn't bow, he didn't salute. He just stared at them with remaining organic eye that looked like it had seen the heat death of the universe. "Welcome to the Prometheus. Keep your suits sealed. The air in here is 90% recycled ghosts." Xyltham stepped forward, his envirosuit shimmering. "I am High Counselor Xyltham. We have come to answer your distress call and to demand an explanation. Your vessel is a hazard to navigation and a threat to our system." Vance let out a short, dry sound that might have been a laugh. "A hazard to navigation, that's rich. Counselor, if we hadn't dropped out of warp here, your entire system would be a memory by next Tuesday. Follow me, but don't touch anything, especially if it's glowing." The walk to the bridge, or what passed for a command center, was a journey through a living hell. They passed crews of humans working with frantic, desperate energy. Men and women, stripped to their waists, welding plates over hissing ruptures, hauling canisters of coolant by hand, shouting orders over. The roar of machinery. They looked emaciated, their eyes hollow, their skin sallow from radiation sickness. Yet they moved with a discipline that terrified Krev. There was no panic. There was only the grim efficiency of people who had accepted death long ago and were simply working to delay it for one more hour. "We thought your species was extinct," Alara said, her voice amplified by her suit's speakers. She floated alongside the Admiral. "The archives say you destroyed yourselves." Vance didn't look back. "We left, we didn't die, we just left." The galaxy was too small, too crowded. We wanted to see what was out there, past the rim, past the void. "And what did you find?" Krev asked. Vance stopped. He turned slowly, the mechanical servos in his leg whirring. He looked at the War Marshal up and down, analyzing the advanced weaponry, the pristine armor. "We found the reason why the galaxy is quiet," Vance said softly. "We found the filter." He turned back and continued walking. The ominous statement hung in the air, heavier than the radiation. They reached the engineering deck. It was a cavernous space dominated by a central reactor core that defied engineering logic. It was a sphere of containment magnets suspended in a web of gravity beams. Inside the sphere was not a fusion reaction. It was a tear, a rip in reality, and through the rip a violet fire poured, struggling against the magnetic cage, seeking to break free. The noise was a constant, low-frequency scream. "That," Vance pointed with his cane, "is the storm. We didn't name the ship Storm of Smoldering Doom. We named the situation." "What is it?" Zaltham whispered, his scientific curiosity warring with his primal fear. "It's an entropy fissure," Vance said. "We found a structure, ancient, billions of years old, out in the dark. We thought it was a gate. We opened it. We were wrong. It wasn't a gate. It was a dam." The humans gathered around a holographic table which flickered with low power. Vance keyed a command and a map appeared. It showed the galaxy, a spiral of light, and then it showed the void beyond. In the darkness, red dots were encroaching, thousands of them, millions. "We call them the Hollow," Vance said. "They don't have ships, they don't have bodies, they are energy, sentient resonance. They feed on order, they feed on structure. They eat stars to stop them from burning. They eat civilizations to stop them from thinking. They want the universe cold and still." The counselors stared in horror. The scale of the threat was beyond comprehension. "We fought them," Vance continued, his voice devoid of pride, filled only with weariness. "For 300 years. The Terran mandate didn't collapse. We mobilized. We took every ship, every soldier, every resource, and we went into the dark to hold the line. We built the Aegis Line, a wall of fortresses in the void. We held them back." 300 years, Alara gasped, "but we heard nothing, no signals." "We maintained radio silence," Vance said. "The Hollow, they track communications, they track hope. If we had called back to the galaxy, we would have led them right to you. So we died in the dark. We burned our worlds to fuel the fleets. We turned our society into a war machine. We forgot art. We forgot peace. We only remembered how to kill." He looked at the reactor. "But we failed. The Aegis Line fell 6 months ago. The Prometheus is the last capital ship of the 7th Fleet. We were carrying the prototype away to seal the fissures, a chaotic energy bomb, a reality anchor, but we took heavy fire. Our drive was damaged. The bomb, the containment cracked. It's leaking. That's what's in the core. It's not an engine. It's the weapon meant to save the universe, and it's eating my ship from the inside out." Krev stepped forward, his aggression gone, replaced by a soldier's respect. "You are containing a weapon that could destroy a star system inside a ship that is falling apart while fleeing an enemy that eats reality." "Tuesday," Vance repeated. "It's been a long Tuesday." "Why come here?" Zaltham asked. "Why return now?" "Because we can't fix it alone," Vance said. He looked at the alien counselor, his human eyes pleading for the first time. "We ran out of parts. We ran out of coolant. We ran out of men. The Prometheus is going to breach. If it breaches here, the weapon detonates. It will create a singularity that will swallow this sector, but if we can stabilize it, if we can repair the magnetic bottle, we can take it back. We can finish the mission." The silence that followed was different from the silence in the sanctum. This was the silence of a precipice. The collective had spent centuries in peace debating trade tariffs and border disputes. They had forgotten the concept of sacrifice. And now this battered, broken species, these humans they had dismissed as savages, had dragged the reality of the universe to their doorstep. They were not savages. They were martyrs. They were the shield that had allowed the collective to sleep soundly, ignorant of the monsters in the dark. "What do you need?" Zaltham asked. Vance slumped as if the question released a tension that had held him upright for decades. "We need refined iridium. 4 tons. We need cyclonic coolant coils. And we need engineers. Our engineering team is dead. It's just me and the kids keeping the magnetic field stable." Krev activated his comms. "Fleet Command, this is War Marshal Krev. Priority Alpha 1. Mobilize the engineering core. Strip the reserves from the orbital shipyards. I want every ounce of refined iridium shuttled to my coordinates immediately. And send the medical frigates. We have allies in distress." The next 48 hours were a blur of activity that the Ethel Guardian system had never witnessed. The sleek, beautiful ships of the collective swarmed around the burning hulk of the Prometheus like hummingbirds nursing a wounded dragon. Alien engineers in pristine white suits worked alongside human mechanics covered in grime and oil. The cultural clash was jarring. The aliens worked with precision, silence, and mathematical perfection. The humans worked with percussion, profanity, and intuitive leaps of logic that baffled the Ethel Guardian computers. In the reactor room, the tension was physical. The violet rift was pulsing faster, the magnetic containment groaning under the strain. Sparks showered down from the ceiling constantly. "The frequency is shifting," yelled a human technician, a young woman with bandages wrapped around her head. "The harmonics are off. The alien coolant is too efficient. It's freezing the injectors." "Bypass the regulator," Vance shouted from the command deck above. "Hotwire the flow, make it turbulent." An Ethel Guardian engineer, a tall, slender being named Ilian, looked at the human in horror. "Turbulence introduces chaos. Chaos leads to instability." "Chaos is the only thing this thing understands," the human retorted, ripping a panel off the wall and jamming a wrench into the gears of a valve. "Give me a hammer." "I do not have a hammer," Ilian stammered. "Then give me that heavy rock you call a data slate." They worked together, a symphony of order and chaos. The collective provided the advanced materials, the theoretical physics, the unlimited resources. The humans provided the grit, the improvisation, the sheer refusal to accept the laws of physics when the laws of physics were inconvenient. Slowly, agonizingly, the violet light began to dim. The screaming of the reactor subsided to a dull thrum. The magnetic bottle stabilized. The Prometheus ceased to shake. On the bridge, Admiral Vance collapsed into his command chair. He looked smaller now, the adrenaline fading, leaving only the exhaustion of a man who had lived too long. Xyltham stood beside him, watching the readouts turn from critical red to a stable amber. "It is done," Xyltham said. "The weapon is contained." "For now," Vance whispered. "For now." He looked up at the main screen. The view of the stars was clear again. The nebula was beautiful. He hadn't looked at the stars for their beauty in a long time. He had only looked at them as tactical objectives or potential fuel sources. "We will repair your drive," Xyltham promised. "We will refit your hull. The collective is vast. We have resources you cannot imagine. You do not have to fight this alone anymore." Vance smiled, a sad, crooked expression. "That's the thing, Counselor. We aren't done. We held the line for 300 years, but the line is broken. The hull, they aren't just in the void anymore. They're tracking this ship. They're tracking the energy signature of the weapon." As if on cue, the proximity alarms began to wail. Not the internal alarms of the Prometheus, but the system-wide defense alarms of the Ethel Guardian home world. "Signature detected," Ilara's voice came over the comms, panic stripping away her composure. "Perimeter 7, multiple contacts. No, not multiple, infinite. It is a cloud of silence." Vance closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. The weariness was gone. The soldier was back. He tapped a sequence into his armrest console. "Battle stations," he said, his voice amplified through the ship. "All hands, this is it. Spin up the kinetic drivers. Load the last of the tungsten shells. If we burn bright." He turned to Xyltham. "You need to leave, Counselor. Get your people back to your planets. Raise your shields. Pray to whatever gods you have." "No," Xyltham said. The alien looked at the screen where the darkness was blotting out the stars. He saw the terrifying magnitude of the enemy. It was a tide of nothingness eating the light, and he saw the single, burning ship of the humans standing between that tide and his home. The Ethel Guardians had spent centuries studying philosophy, art, and diplomacy. They believed they were the pinnacle of civilization, but as Xyltham looked at Admiral Vance, a broken man in a broken ship, preparing to charge into hell for a species he barely knew, he realized the collective had been children playing in a garden, while the humans had been the wolves keeping the forest at bay. "Marshal Krev," Xyltham spoke into his comms, his voice steady, echoing with a newfound authority. "Do not retreat. Flash order to the home fleet. Form up on the Prometheus." "Counselor," Krev's voice crackled, "the tactical projections, we cannot win against that mass." "We do not fight to win today, Marshal. We fight to buy time. Form up on the humans, cover their flanks. If they are the hammer, we will be the anvil." Vance looked at the counselor, surprise registering on his scarred face. You'll be slaughtered. Your ships aren't built for this. You have energy shields. The hollow eat energy. Then we will ram them, Zaltham said, his bioluminescence turning a deep, angry crimson. You showed us the truth, Admiral. The universe is not a safe place. We have been asleep. Thank you for waking us up. The Prometheus groaned as its main thrusters ignited. It was not a graceful acceleration. It was a violent heave. The massive ship turned its bow toward the incoming darkness. Beside it, the silver splinters of the Ethel Guardian fleet took formation, looking like minnows swimming alongside a whale. All decks, Vance said, his hand gripping the throttle. The lost warship is returning to the fight. Let's show them what a storm looks like. The Prometheus accelerated. The smoldering doom was no longer a liability. It was a promise. The violet light of the contained weapon began to bleed into the ship's main cannons, infusing the primitive kinetic slugs with the reality-breaking energy of the fissure. The human ship roared. It didn't fire beams of light or silent torpedoes. It fired massive, super-dense slugs of metal, accelerated to relativistic speeds, wreathed in the entropy fire of the weapon they carried. Each shot hit the encroaching darkness like a thunderclap, shattering the silence, tearing holes in the void. The hollow shrieked, a psychic scream that was felt by every living mind in the system. They swarmed forward, tendrils of shadow lashing out. The Ethel Guardian ships fired their lasers, carving lines in the dark, taking hits, exploding in silent blossoms of fire. But they held. They protected the human ship. And in the center of the chaos, the Prometheus burned. It was a storm of fire and metal, a testament to a species that refused to go quietly into the night. The humans, the underestimated, forgotten ghosts of the galaxy, had returned. They brought with them the horror of the long war, the scars of the deep dark, and the terrible, beautiful resolve of those who have nothing left to lose. As the two fleets clashed, lighting up the edge of the system with the fires of a new age, Zaltham stood on the bridge of the human ship, watching the history of the galaxy change course. The peace was over. The war of the horizon had begun. But as he looked at the grim determination on Vance's face, the counselor felt a strange sensation. It was not fear. It was hope, because the monsters were on their side. And the storm had finally arrived.